Hey there, and welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming Podcast. It is great to have you join us. This podcast series features those who have gained victory over a life encounter. With that life experience, we encourage those who are experiencing something that might seem to be insurmountable. We advance and encourage others by passing forward evaluated life experiences. We have three objectives in this podcast series. We want to encourage those who are engaged in any type of life encounter by offering to walk with you to help you gain victory over anything that might seem impossible. We want to share our experience to help you. Our second objective is to help you develop a confident resolve that there are multiple options to get past any life obstacle. It's a matter of thinking into the situation. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are facing a dilemma resulting from a previous decision you wish you could reverse, we want to help you think into all of the facts and factors involved in making an informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business manager, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture Company who is sponsoring this podcast series. Today we feature Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge, who has about 30 years practice in mental health. She has what seems to me to be a very simplified approach to, or at least a very understandable approach to mental health. There's nothing simple about it per se, but it's easy. We sometimes complicate mental health, what it's about, stigmatize it, and so forth. This conversation, I think, helps put everything in a good context, that everything can be simplified in that, or at least made easy to understand by having awareness of some of the symptoms that can lead to our need for mental health. Marty, what are some takeaways you got from, and what can our listeners get from Dr. Capanna-Hodge?
Well, the first thing she says is it's okay to seek help. The figures of how mental health is on the rise, and younger people are really more adept to seeking help than we older people. I guess we feel like we've been through experiences, we don't have any stress, or we've learned to work through it. But she recommends to list 3 to 5 things that are stressing you and brainstorm strategies to relieve that stress, and realize it takes time and little steps with your action plan, and you may need professional help to take your little steps.
And a lot of times just documenting those things that are stressful in our life help us with our awareness. Let's listen and learn together. Dr. Capanna-Hodge, thank you for joining us. You are a consummate expert in mental health, and our listeners need to learn more about mental health. Marty and I are not certified mental health experts. We are, I would say, outside observers. But in our context of outside observers, we have, just very briefly, there is a bridge about 20 minutes south of us since October 2021, and we are recording in March 2022. In that time period, 5 people have jumped off that bridge, 4 people to their death. I can't help but think that some people have pent up emotions. There's something that they think, I cannot tolerate what I'm going through. I just need to end my life. Marty and I are the type that we want to help people through awareness, and we're not an expert, of course, but we want to help people through awareness to identify some of the symptoms, perhaps, and without labeling or stigmatizing, perhaps help them realize that, yes, I do need mental health help. And I used to think that myself, mental health, mental illness, mental disability were synonymous. And so, gosh, I'm going to hide in a closet. I don't want to be labeled as somebody incredibly stupid. I don't want to be institutionalized. Those are just some of my personal feelings. Dr. Capanna-Hodge, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have this conversation. This is my 3rd decade in mental health. A lot has changed, but a lot hasn't changed. And I'm an integrative and pediatric mental health expert, and that's really what I do on a day-to-day basis. I got involved in doing integrative care because when I got involved in the early 90s, the care for people with mental health issues was different to a point, but I just saw even then 3 decades ago, people not getting better with help. And, I recently had somebody this week who for 9 years has been trying to solve their depression and their anxiety and has had suicide attempts. And I'd like to tell you that was an abnormal story, but we know through NAMI research in 2019 that it takes 11 years from the onset of a problem before somebody gets proper help. And that's in the United States, and that's just not okay. And so we have to start looking at what are those early signs and symptoms, and we have to destigmatize getting help. I think that is a positive trend that is occurring here now in 2022. People do feel more comfortable getting help. Unfortunately, we still have a very reactive, crisis-driven mental health system where people aren't recognizing their early signs and getting help for themselves, for their kids, or somebody they love. Often there's a physical or a mental breakdown because mental health issues, stressors, anxiety, depression, don't always lead to the difficulties you think they're going to lead to, and they can lead to physical problems, autoimmune disease, gastrointestinal problems, one of the most common symptoms, sleep problems. They can lead to a host of other things, and people aren't making the connection to an underlying stressor to a physical problem. So this is a great conversation to talk about what are some of these signs and symptoms that we really need to recognize in our loved ones and ourselves.
Right on. I want to just mention briefly, you mentioned pediatrics, and we learned very, very recently, not personally, through another person, of a 7-year-old who had suicidal tendencies. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, 7 years old. I didn't even know you would know what the definition of suicide is. How can you address that? I mean, do children at that age?
Well, suicide increased in the last decade 56% between 10 and 24-year-olds. The numbers are even greater during the pandemic. We've had a real increase, and there's just constant data coming out from across the globe. Right now, young people ages 10 to 24 across the globe, 14% have a diagnosed mental health issue. In the United States, 50% of youth who have a mental health problem do not get help. 50%. So, when you talk about a 7-year-old, first of all, we don't know the specifics, right? And my instant thought is there's got to be a trauma. There has to be something going on in that kid's life. We often think of mental health because of good marketing by pharma, that everything is biochemical, and that's just not the case. I rarely see people who really their issue is stemming from an organic brain-driven issue. What I see is things in people's lives, right? So, people say anxiety's in my family, that's why I'm anxious. Well, is it that you inherited the brain of an anxious person, or did you grow up with a family of anxious people who displayed anxious behaviors? And that is way more likely to influence you. We know that through all different kinds, that parenting, and particularly maternal mental health, the maternal mental health is the number one determining factor of a child's mental health. And not to put pressure on moms, it means that we should be taking care of ourselves. Instead of looking at it as a burden, you have to look at it as a blessing, that you have this unbelievable ability to influence in such a beautiful, positive way the mental health of your child. So we don't know what's going on with this 7-year-old. Could have been bullied. Very young children who do complete a suicide is what we call it. First of all, it's often very impulsive. They don't really understand what it is. They may have heard about it in the media or seen something or had a family member who killed themselves, right? Like you said, I wouldn't have known about that. Well, you would know about it if it came into your world. And so then it becomes an option. And a 7-year-old doesn't have the cognitive capability to fully understand what an end result of actions are, right? I don't know what it would be. My oldest childhood friend, Michelle, when she was 13, she just decided to start driving the family car. And she didn't really think about the actions of that, right? And it was the 80s. So when she got pulled over, she didn't get arrested. They took her home. I love that story. She's a great, great human being, but she didn't really understand the impact of it. She was like, didn't think I could hurt somebody. I don't really know how to drive. And she actually didn't get pulled over for driving improperly. She got pulled over because they knew the family and knew that she was the youngest and like, what was she doing driving? So she's a character. She didn't, I don't remember, but my guess is, Michelle, that wasn't a one-time deal. She probably did it again. So we have to think about why that would happen. And usually there is some major event. And unfortunately, we do have a big increase in younger children under 10 completing or attempting suicide. And when it comes to young people and suicide in general, people often, you're more likely to have an attempt where it doesn't end somebody's life. But it is always such a reflection of a sense of hopelessness that they have no other option. And most suicides are not well thought out, that it becomes that one moment of all ages, that one moment in desperation that they make a choice that's not going to help them and serve them, certainly not going to improve their situation and their mental health. And also people don't realize, years ago, I worked with somebody who was bipolar, and we could talk about some of the risk factors for suicide. Being bipolar is a risk factor for suicide. A young man who had attempted probably more than 10 times to kill himself. And he really talked to me about it. And he was a man in his 20s at this point, maybe even early 30s. And, he said each time it was due to the cycle of where he was in bipolar. He was very impulsive about it. He didn't really think it through. And he eventually stopped because he realized that he was actually very likely he knew he kept surviving, and that at some point what it was going to do was cause him brain damage or be in a wheelchair. And he basically did a benefit analysis and was like, I'm literally not killing myself. And when I have these attempts, I'm at a very high risk to be, disabled for the rest of my life. And I need another option. And it was a very much a classic case of somebody who was truly struggling with the right treatment to manage his bipolar. And eventually he did find it and was able to, really use his thinking skills to say, like, this is not a good option for anybody. And I need to find another way to deal with my feelings, deep feelings of hopelessness and sadness. But that's way more on the extreme where you have somebody, another big risk factor. The biggest risk factor for suicide is a recent breakup. Young people are very high risk for suicide after having a breakup of a love relationship. And we don't often think about that because we, as adults, look back on our young people, whether they're high schoolers or college kids, and we think, well, you're going to break up a bunch of times before you find that one. But in their world, it's very real for them. So I think parents need to have a real, an eye to your kids and offer support at a higher level during those times, because our kids need it. And they're way more stressed in general, kids today, than most parents who are listening or grandparents than our times because of many factors.
I want to ask you about the environment, meaning, let's just take, for example, the young person who breaks up and they're a product of that. They're emotional because of, but is part of the environment, I can make it through I'm projecting myself to be the teenager who just experienced a breakup. Is part of the environment my parental training? In other words, my parents have taught me how to deal with this, therefore I'll be less emotional over this. Is it a matter of some of the teenagers saying, well, I'm just a product of my environment, everything in my family is chaotic, that kind of thing? Maybe I'm all over with my question, but I'm trying to help the listener to be able to effectively identify some of the symptoms that say, I just want to come up next to you, so to speak. I want to develop a relationship to help you through whatever you're experiencing.
I mean, we know that when family environments are highly stressful or chaotic long term, that doesn't mean we don't experience periods of that. What is the key to mental health? I mean, really is I think what underneath your question, and that is inner resiliency, and that's having coping skills, and that takes time and effort to develop. It's not we'll just get through it, right? And it starts in a very nonverbal way with kids. They're watching what their caregivers and parents are doing. Right. So, if you're on the highway, I joke all the time, my life's petty annoyance is all the people who drive in the passing lane real slow. And it's when I start doing EFT tapping. It's also when I full on potty mouth comes out. And, my kids see me the rest of the day like sunshine. And then I get in that car and I'm like, why are they there? And then I make jokes about it. But I was like, look, guys, this is the one thing that stresses me out. And I've learned to adopt in a different way. If that was a reflection all the time, and I was potty mouthing and swearing and showing myself to be so stressed in all my life, what is the nonverbal message that my kids are getting? And I remember one time, a great example, I love to talk about it, is driving. And I love driving fast. Anyway, my car, all of a sudden I was driving on the highway with my then 10-year-old, and my car said, pull over, your car is an emergency. Just said that to me. And I was like, what's going on? And it was like, get off the road right now, whatever it said to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, this is a life lesson. So I said to my John Carlo, hey, listen, I'm not going to pull over on the side of the highway. I'm going to roll down to the Starbucks so we can get some tea. He was like, oh, okay. All right, okay. And he started to get nervous, and I was like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Like, we call AAA or whatever. And we wind up waiting like an hour and a half for AAA. They never showed up. Their dad came. We were like doing all these funny things, and we made it like this really funny thing. And for like months, he was like, Mike, I wound up blowing a gasket is what wound up happening in my car. We wind up having this whole banter joking about the whole thing. Now, if I had flipped out, started acting like, I can't believe my car blew its gasket. I was like, my car blew its gasket. It's under warranty, whatever. And we just made it like a non big deal. Those are the moments that imprint on your kids that show them how to manage little and big stressor. That is how you build that inner resilience. Unfortunately, not everybody in the world has homes where people live in homes with violence, verbal abuse, unhappy, marriages, or living with in-laws that maybe have different values than you. People live in stressful situations, and that's a reality. And not every, particularly woman, can pick up and leave their partner or make different choices for themselves because of finances. So I don't want to be naive to things, but it is a lot more in those little moments that helps people to build grit. And so when you say, how does somebody get through a major thing like a breakup? It's not as simple as you have the skills, you get through it. But what we are very clear about through research is that when I talk about a resiliency mindset, and it's how you view, manage, and recover from stress. And when you can recover from stress well, that's great. When you can manage stress well, that's great. But when you view stress completely differently, and you just don't see it as a stressor, it's even better, right? And so when somebody just doesn't activate in the same way, that is really how we support our nervous system, because we're living this, not to get all nerdy and scientifically, but the base of my work is a calm brain, happy family, because our nervous system are activated, we're not capable of good thoughts and feelings. Our nervous system gets hijacked. So the more we can do for stable environments, that's, really important. And we do want to look for those signs, right? Like, how do you know a person of any age has some difficulties? And I think this is a conversation that everybody needs to have. And we have a continuum. We have internalizers and externalizers. And anxiety, depression, OCD, all that can live along that continuum. So internalizers are people that hold it in, And externalizers are people that show it really clearly. And internalizers, that's where we sort of classically think, oh, they're going to be depressed and not be able to get out of bed, or they stop talking and those kind of things. But there's a lot of other things that may not be observable, like really horrible, hateful thoughts to yourself, or you're on that worry train internally, you're just looping, and you're functioning, right? So most people with mental health struggles function at a high level, meaning they're going to work, they're parenting, they're going to school, and people don't realize it. We think mental health difficulties means you're shutting down. Well, shutting down means something's been going on a long time, or something significant happened that caused a reaction. And then externalizers, they're the people that are yelling, putting the holes in the wall, maybe swearing, and everywhere in between, you're going to see physical things like sleep problems, gastrointestinal problems, headaches, chronic pain. Today, somebody called the office this morning because they want to know if we could help with constipation. And most people would say, what is somebody calling a psychologist about constipation? It's a real gastrointestinal symptom of chronic long-term stress. So we'd have to look what's underneath that. So I want people to start thinking about some of those physical signs that they may not be connecting within themselves or somebody they care about, and take a second look at it and look at ways to regulate your nervous system, like breath work and other things we could talk about.
Doctor, I want to go back to the breakup. And this is the teenager that her boyfriend or the girlfriend broke up. Immediately you think rejection. Talk to the teenager and the parent. How do we help someone through rejection, the feeling of rejection?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's valid. You don't want to ever say, oh, don't worry about it. And, what you want to say to somebody is, I hear you. And how hard must that be for you? We often want to dismiss uncomfortable feelings. And that is the worst thing you could do. The more we teach ourselves, and certainly kids, to learn how to acknowledge and get through uncomfortable feelings, the better we are at actually managing them. We live in a culture where people want to shove down feelings, through binge watching Netflix or not leaving their room or drinking alcohol. Many people in the United States drink 3 to 6 drinks a night. I mean, that's a lot of drinks. So, what you really want to say is, I can only imagine this is really hard for you. And I like to say things, this is what I say to my kids and my clients is, where do you feel it in your body? Put your hand on it. Simple things like saying, what do you think could do to help lessen that? And just make it really, really small so that they have some sense of control. You also can talk to them and say, what do you need from me right now? How can I help you through this? And a lot of times it's just listening, what can I do to listen? And being, teenagers, depending on where they are in their teens, right? Under age 15, they're not going to have as great a communication skills, but they still want you there. Doing an activity with a teenager is a great way to connect without forcing the issue. And as I like to talk about any big topic, it's not the Spanish Inquisition. Don't grill your kid. Just be there and, talk to them. And it could be about other things. Just by them feeling a sense of comfort, what is going on with them will come up. I also love to share stories about my own stuff with teenagers. You know what I mean? We recently went on a family vacation. My 17-year-old, we were telling him some of our college stories. My husband and I are college sweethearts, and we were cracking up. And it's great. And they need to see you and your faults and things that happen. So I think that can be really helpful too.
We sometimes need to discern a person's feelings by the expressions of their face. The best thing we can do is empathize with them, not attempt to dismiss it, marginalize it, or in any other way communicate. We think what they're feeling is so small, it shouldn't bother them at all. Fact is, it does. If we are able to empathize with that person, they know we're making an attempt to communicate with them, and they can express their feelings that way. And by expressing their feelings, that frequently will help a person to relieve the anxiety, the stress they're feeling. It takes a little bit of practice, discernment, But as we are able to empathize and truly identify with the person, we can help them overcome any stress they are enduring. I want to go back to, you were mentioning calm brain and then also empathizing. There is a tendency amongst some of us to say something to the effect, just get over yourself. How can something so small be bothering you? And that, I think, tends to worsen things with me. I honestly am feeling, and you're trying to dismiss it. Is that a part of our problem?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people try to be helpful and they just accidentally say the wrong thing and they don't really know what to say. So even if you don't understand, you can say, oh, I hear that is hard for you. You know what I mean? And just that statement alone, you're not being dismissive, you're not being disrespectful, and you're being really clear that you're listening to them. I can't tell you how helpful that it is. Being dismissive, particularly with somebody who's struggling, whether it's an adult or a teenager or a young kid, is terrible, because you're just cut off the communication and you're breaking lines of communication. And especially with little things with kids, the more you cut off the little things, they're not going to come to you when the big things. And that's a problem. All those little pieces help you deal with big things and help your kids be good decision makers when you're not around.
You said something very, very important. If we don't pay attention to and demonstrate we care about the small things, they're certainly not going to come to us about the bigger things. I think that's extremely important. You mentioned earlier, 50% of the people do not seek help. I'm guessing it could be because of stigma. They don't realize. Can you help the listener who maybe the person who doesn't need mental health, they're okay? Help us identify the person who does need help and they feel stigmatized. They're part of the 50% who will not seek help, but they need help. How can we help that person?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think 50% of people don't get help because they're not connecting it to mental health. So it's showing up behaviorally, physically, and behaviorally, I mean, adults too. We all know that person who's viperish when they talk to you and easily irritated, and you're very careful about what you say to them because they could bite your head off. Well, why isn't that somebody with a mood regulation problem? But they may not nobody's ever connected the dots for them for that, right? And a lot of times something big has to happen, a breakdown, conflict. A number of years ago, I diagnosed somebody in their 60s as being on the autism spectrum because multiple conflicts at work. Very classic spectrum, a man. So I think the thing is that we can only connect the dots when we look back, right? That's what Steve Jobs says. And what happens is we start to question, right? Like, how many of the listeners has had a physical problem that somebody sent you for an MRI and this and that and a battery of tests and comes back. And then finally somebody says, do you think it's stress? When we know 70% of all doctors' visits are stress related, but yet doctors want to give you a bunch of tests. So I think what you should always assume is stress is part of what is going on with everybody in any situation. Even if it really is cancer, you're going to have to counter it, the stress. And we're not taking active measures in our world to counter stress daily. We might do things like go for a massage. As little as 10 minutes a day is going to help to get your nervous system from a stress sympathetic to a relaxed parasympathetic state. I think the biggest takeaway is don't ignore physical signs like gastrointestinal pain. Changes in behavior are sometimes obvious, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's a slow change in behavior. But when you look back about, a coworker, a friend, and all of a sudden in the pandemic, I had friendships lost in the pandemic because sometimes people were so eclipsed by fear and anxiety and really, really struggled and were unwilling to get help. More people sought therapy in the pandemic for the first time than ever recorded. So I think people were recognizing it because they were feeling the effects. If you're seeing problems in your sleep, gastrointestinal, any of these things, or noticing changes in yourself or somebody you care about, get help.
Talk to the person who was me in a former life. I would not have come to you. I would not have come to anyone because I felt internally I'm dumb, stupid, awkward. I don't want to expose myself through conversation because you or anybody else may institutionalize me, which just makes me feel further inferior. You, based on this conversation, could say, well, Ron, you need help, but I'm not going to because I'm so shy, introverted, and I'm awkward, and any other term similar to that. But if you show me you are a safe space, I maybe through conversation will let you know that, yeah, here's some things that are troubling me. Is that a viable approach, doctor, to a person like me who's, I just did not ever want to expose myself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we all have misconceptions, right? And depending on what generation you are, one of the cool things about the younger generation is they're very open to therapy. Depending on where you live, regions are even more accepting of therapy. So I think we have to let go, and we also have to educate people when they have a notion. Like, institutions no longer exist. That's something that doesn't happen anymore. And that's because when there was such a stigma attached to somebody who had a more severe mental health issue, that was the mode of care at up until the early, somewhere in the 80s, right? That was a very common thing. And then they deinstitutionalized, and we have community-based care, which has pros and cons. That's a whole other conversation. We make mental health way too hard. While I'm a big fan of psychotherapy, I'm not a huge fan of talk therapy. I think talk therapy, you have to regulate the nervous system first before you start trying to make cognitive behavioral connections. And when you calm your nervous system down, you're able to do the work. So for me, the first part is calming that brain with things like breath work and meditation, yoga, prayer, gratitude practices. Of course, I do stuff called neurofeedback, biofeedback, PEMF. We have to have a concerted effort to help regulate our nervous system. And that is something everybody can do, whether they choose to use free apps on meditation or go onto YouTube, but you have to spend 10 minutes a day. It's like somebody trying to lose 50 pounds and they're like, well, I'm only going to go on a diet 50% of the time. Well, you might lose some weight, but you're not really going to get there in the way that you should. So nobody wants to put effort in our world today, but it's really those little steps, and it could be as little as 10 minutes that can make a dramatic impact. I know when I work with people, I make them chart for 30 days, breath work or whatever strategy we've decided to use. And I make it 30 days because you need a concerted effort. And it's just 0 to 5. Where's your stress level every day? There's nobody that it's not going to improve. It's just breath work calms the nervous system that down. Then we pair that with good therapy with a therapist, and people are all over the world. And some people benefit from health coaching or wellness coaching. It doesn't always have to be that very traditional talk therapy that people sort of have in their mind.
Thank you. I want to address one other topic. Is it appropriate for each one of us through our personal self-awareness? It's an introspective look to know exactly what it is that can be a stress reducer. I'll just say one example. When I listen to classic country music, that can relieve stress with me. But is it a matter of being very aware of who we are, where we are at that moment? Maybe I just need to pause my work day, whatever, and I just need to relax. Is that a part of, or am I oversimplifying this?
Everybody needs a toolkit. Everybody needs their own toolkit, and they're going to have different things in it. And also too, as somebody who's, done so many things for my nervous system. So, I walk the walk. I don't just talk. You'll have a lot of exciting things going on. I'm hiring a whole team of people to support me in the Philippines right now. And so what happens is I know when I get too excited, my sleep starts breaking down because I have a super active mind. So I've had to make time in my day, at the end of my day, to be doing something to help me to calm down. So that might mean a magnesium bath or sauna, or I have this little foot massager. Those are the things that benefit me. That might not be what benefits you. And so I think you having more than one and tools at your disposal, I think breath work should be automatic in everybody's, unless they really are very reactive. And some people are reactive to it for a whole other conversation. Breath work is the quickest way to get you into a parasympathetic state. People don't know how to do breath work. And I have some, if you go to YouTube and you look under Dr. Roseann, there's a video on breath, and you can Google diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing, and you can retrain how you're breathing. You have to breathe out of your belly and not your chest. So personal tools to help regulate yourself are great, but they're only great if you use them.
Very well said. Breath work. I am very familiar with that. Without going off onto a tangent, I know we can hyperventilate for various reasons, but as we very consciously control our breathing, that can control virtually everything that we are going through. Doctor, let me bring this in for a landing by asking you for a call to action. The person who is maybe for the first time realizing maybe I am under stress, maybe I do need some help, but the person is saying, is there a quick test? Is there something that can help me over the edge, so to speak, to say, I really do need to seek help because you've helped me realize there's no stigma attached to asking for help. Maybe I just need to, or I feel like I want to take a little quiz or something. Just give me some sort of indication of where I am.
Yeah, I think all of us could benefit from making a list of 3 to 5 things that are stressors for you on your daily life, and maybe rating them from a scale of 0 to 10 or 0 to 5, whatever works for you. And then that's one side of the page, and the other side of the page, anything that's, if you're doing 0 to 10, anything over a 4 is a significant daily stressor. And then brainstorm strategies that you think you can help to manage that. I think sometimes we just don't think. I'm such a logical person, and it's like, well, what could I do? Maybe your commute is really terrible. Could you leave earlier? Could you leave later? And sometimes those little things can have such a dramatic effect on you. Maybe you're spending too much time with your mother and she's very negative. What kind of conversations can you have with her that isn't very triggering? Those little pieces can be helpful. And if you really are like, oh my God, I have a list of 5 things and I'm a level 10 stress, you probably need to see a therapist. You need somebody who's going to coach you to help you get through and manage some of these things. Everyone always thinks like therapy is like you're pouring your guts out and you're going to sit there and talk about your mom, because that's the time of Freud. But a good therapist should help you identify whatever is causing you challenges in your life and help you put a plan into place to deal with them on your own. Nobody's got a magic wand, and change in any area takes work. It's not the kind of work you think it is. Those little steps that really can create some really nice change.
Very well said. I think the little steps are, my interpretation is, folks, let's take action. Let's don't sit back and just hope something will happen. Let's take action and be the catalyst to make things happen.
Well, it's sort of like, the saying of lotto, you can't win if you don't play. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just, we're in a world where we think there's a magic wand to things, which is literally why I have a magic wand in my desk and I pull it out at every meeting, because we're losing our empowerment. We're giving our power away to a pill or some quick fix. And it's really those little steps that create lifelong wellness and mental health.
Very, very well said. Dr. Capanna-Hodge, thank you for your life work. Thank you for your insights. We hope our listeners take the action we need to work with ourselves and others to achieve a better mental health. Thank you so much. Dr. Capanna-Hodge addresses mental health in very relatable, easy to understand terms. Too often it seems, from my uncertified perspective, We are uncertain exactly what mental health is, what it constitutes. There's stigma attached to it. We don't want to label, and therefore we tend to withdraw or otherwise not address mental health with those who can benefit from a conversation about mental health. I know for me personally, in the form of a testimony, at an early age, my mental health was not good, but I would never come to you to discuss my mental health. I would never identify to you that I'm not okay, because that would just affirm how stupid, awkward, other terms similar to that I was. I would not want to identify that I'm just a strange person who cannot cope with life and so forth. Therefore, I would remain the way I am. It's not until I became associated with others who represented a safe space, they accepted me. That was a huge aspect of my life. Others accepted me. Call it a tribe, call it a close circle of friends, whatever term you use, those people represented those who accepted me, and the term acceptance was just huge because I wasn't sure who I could trust. I wasn't sure who would have any empathy for me. I just went about life going through stuff until it was 4 men who showed they accepted me. That was a huge turning point in my life. I want to encourage all of our listeners to represent a safe space to those within our circle of influence. Just be willing to accept, be willing to associate with, develop that connected relationship that represents a safe space to where even the most introverted person would feel comfortable sharing. And even if we don't reach that level of safe space with an extreme introvert, at least be willing to discern factors are maybe operative in that person's life. Again, we do not want to stigmatize or label anyone, but rather, as we choose to reach out, relate with, accept others who may need help, we know that others will benefit because we care. When we care, when we know that others know we care, I believe we can make some inroads. It's a matter of us feeling confident in ourselves. It's a matter of us knowing what to discern and how to relate to other people. Everyone can benefit from a coach. Some people need coaching to overcome some aspects of the past, some traits, some things said to or about us that are deeply hidden within us, but it's in our subconscious that tend to affect us and make our decisions. They tend to dominate our life, our thought processes. We can help others overcome those type things that are troubling people. Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. Schedule a 30-minute complimentary coaching session. Through that, we can help you determine if we're the right people to help you overcome anything that is keeping you from performing at your full potential. Marty and I are certified coaches through the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. We want to reach out to you and help you become the best you can be. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating with this podcast, and we hope you will want to share this podcast with your LinkedIn connection, your Facebook friends, your Instagram and Twitter communities. The more we share, the more we engage, the more we comment with each other, the greater benefit we will be to those who can benefit from various aspects of mental health. Mental health, emotional health, physical health, all correlate from my perspective to be a better person. Let's share with each other. Let's comment. Let's advance each other. Let's have a heart to reach out and work with others in our life to be a greater influence with them in a very positive direction. We look forward to working with you.